With versatile decision making and deck building alongside what feels like having 15 cards in hand permanently, Lucy's deck that you should either be playing or understand how to play against. This is the Lucy Leader Spotlight. Lucy is a red-blue Dressrosa and Revolutionary Army type leader with 5,000 power with the effect when attacking and on your opponent's attack, you may trash any number of event or stage cards from your hand. This leader gains plus 1,000 power during this battle for every card trashed. Activate main. Once per turn, if you have activated an event with a base cost of 3 or more during this turn, draw 1 card. This leader effect has 2 parts, both centering around events, meaning that the deck list must include a steaming amount of events to consistently and fully abuse this effect without falling behind on board. Now let me tell you a little story. I came home recently and I decided that the next day I really wanted to stream, but then I realized that my old browser that I used to use on this computer doesn't have a video pop-up feature nor a split screen feature. But also I was thinking, switching over right now 10 minutes before I want to start my stream, that's kind of a pain, isn't it? Well, no, it isn't, because OperaGX, the sponsor of this video, makes it extremely easy to switch over. In the synchronization settings, I can instantly and in one click import all of my bookmarks and browsing history into my new browser, meaning that I don't have to type in twitter.com or youtube.com the first time to make sure that my browser remembers what I'm actually looking for when I just type Y. Everything was instantly set up in 10 minutes and I was ready to stream immediately. Because I was able to get it going so quickly, I was able to use things like that split screen feature, which I've become so used to now, on stream as a really useful tool to help compare 2 different statistics. Oh, these are flagship battle stats. Let's compare this actually. Let me do something cool here. So with the split screen settings, with the OperaGX browser, you look at the play rates of the decks at this tournament, the Bandai Card Game Fest, and we could also look at the flagship play rate. And then after my stream finished, of course, I decided to go back and do some of the more fun things like changing my cursor, my background, even the background music or the keyboard sounds to make the browser feel a little bit more cozy and a little bit more me. This entire process from start to finish before I wanted to start streaming and those small customizations didn't even take 20 minutes to get everything done. And that's how easy it is to switch over your browser and start using some of these excellent features alongside so many more features that you can only find in the OperaGX browser. Stop using your browser today, switch over to OperaGX in my link in the description and the pinned comment below, and let's get back into the video. Lucy carries on the torch of Poltergeist D Ace as Red Ace rotates out from the standard regulation both metaphorically and literally with an extremely similar leader effect worthy of the man who now beholds the Flame Fruit. Ace historically had the issue of needing to choose when he wanted to develop his board via cards like the 7-cost Ace or the 9-cost Newgate, or if he wanted to use his events like Flame Emperor or Fire Fist, making the deck difficult to manage and play to get the maximum value out of your leader effect. Red-Blue Lucy, on the other hand, does not suffer from these issues due to one key card within this deck, the 7-cost Sable. Sable is a 7-cost 9,000 power character with blocker and on play if your leader has the Dressrosa type, activate up to 1 Dressrosa type event from your hand. Not only are you developing a huge character and huge blocker on the board, not only are you activating an event for no additional cost, but you are also activating the second part of your leader effect for a free draw as well. These 3 merits on a single card as well as the breadth of events at Lucy's fingertips makes Lucy a truly feared meta contender in OP15. Before we go further, this is the list for Lucy that I'm currently running. I'm going to explain each and every card as well as why they're in the deck and why some cards aren't in the deck later on in this video as we go through where it seems most natural. The core fantasy of this deck is to play the 7-cost Sable repeatedly, and so in order to do this consistently, the deck will need searchers to find not just one, but multiple Sable to solder your defenses and heat up your attacks. It's for this reason that this deck must run 4 different kinds of searchers that can all access the 7-cost Sable. 1-cost Rebecca, 1-cost Viola, and the 1-cost Follow Me and I Will Guide You are all Dressrosa type searchers this deck can run. Do note that this search event can only search characters, so do not make the mistake of picking up your events off this card. However, as this event increases the consistency of your deck, as well as of course having 1000 counter due to your leader effect, it's definitely worth adding to your deck should you have the space for it. The other searcher that this deck runs is the 1-cost Bella Betty. Though Betty doesn't find our other core attacker in this deck, Cavendish, it's still run because not only is the 7-cost Sable the Revolutionary Army type, but also a surprising number of events in the deck have the Revolutionary Army typing as well. The reason we are running these cards at these ratios despite the varying downsides and upsides is for a reason we will touch upon very shortly. However, first, let's round out the main attackers of this deck, as there are essentially only 2 for the most part. Your mid-game powerhouse and the handsome man who's going to help you get to the point where you can start spamming your 7-cost Sables is the 4-cost Cavendish. This 4-cost 6,000 power character, when attacking once per turn, can draw 2 cards and trash 1 from your hand. This card, also having the Dressrosa type, makes it very easy to justify using in this deck as it's well statted, further plays into the fantasy of drawing an explosive number of cards, and it can also be played off a new event in OP15, and no one else can have it. It's our memento of him. This 4-cost event, if your leader is Lucy, you can choose one of the following effects. Either draw 2 cards and trash one from your hand, then play up to 1 Dressrosa type character with a cost of 4 or less from your hand, therefore playing out the 4-cost Cavendish, or return 1 stage to the owner's hand. This second part of the effect is currently only used to get rid of Ima's 1-cost Marijoa or the 7-cost Empty Throne, so in other matchups you don't have to worry about the second part of the effect and can exclusively look at the top part of this effect. Using this event to play Cavendish essentially allows you to go completely card neutral while developing a character who can continuously increase your hand size every turn that it remains on the board. You may notice that this deck list only runs 4 4-cost Dressrosa type characters, and while you may think this is a little bit low and inconsistent for a card that you're looking for desperately in the early game, let's look at the other options. The main other options are the 2000 counter 4-cost Cavendish as well as the 4-cost Bartolomeo. We'll talk about the Cavendish later on when you're talking about 2000 counters within this deck, so let's look at the Bartolomeo. This 4-cost 6000 power character, when KO'd, you can instead trash an event from your hand to protect it, and on play activate 1 Dressrosa type event from your hand with a base cost of 3 or less. Frankly, this card sounds crazy on paper, effectively acting as a small 7-cost Subtle. However, the reason why this card isn't run all too much in the deck list is because the 3-cost Dressrosa type events really just aren't that good. Though there are some lower cost Dressrosa type events, we really want to be using 3-cost ones because this will activate our leader effect. So looking at the 3-cost Dressrosa type events, the first one is going to be go ahead and use them, Mr. Luffy. This event, again, you can choose one of the following 2 effects. Either draw 2 cards, or up to one of your Dressrosa type characters gains blocker until the end of the opponent's next end phase. Remember that your leader effect will proc, so technically this card is going to be drawing you 3 cards. Barrier Bullets draws 1 card and gives your leader plus 1000 power until the end of your opponent's next end phase, making your leader a 6000 power leader on the opponent's turn, as well as drawing 2 cards thanks to your leader effect. This card also has the trigger to give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 4000 power during this turn. Now on paper, these cards are really good. Who's going to say no to a 4-cost 6000 that draws 3 cards on play? Reiju's in shambles. But this isn't just a pure 4-cost 6000 that draws 3 cards, because you have to have these other cards within your deck, and importantly also within your hand to be able to use them. Considering the amount of space in the deck and the necessity for higher impact cards to swing the game in your favor, these cards simply are not good enough, and therefore by extension, Bartolomeo is not good enough either. Additionally, although your leader can turn events into counter, characters without counter will remain bricks in your hand. And because Cavendish and Bartolomeo are both counterless cards, you really have to choose one or the other to make sure you don't fill your hand full of bricks. Cavendish is a standalone, simple, purely powerful character, which in turn makes it easy to use, and Bartolomeo has a higher deck building cost, requiring you to play lots of these smaller 3-cost events that you don't necessarily always want to be running. Therefore, Cavendish has been the 4-cost of choice for a majority of Lucy players. And while there are other characters in this deck that I will discuss later on, I think it's more important to talk about the rest of the core with this deck, starting with the 7-cost events. This deck runs both Dressrosa type 7-cost events that were printed in OP15, as they have 2 very different use cases. That being said, Fire Fist is going to be the most powerful event in this deck. When activated, your leader gains plus 3000 power during this turn and gives up to one of your opponent's characters minus 8000 power until the end of your opponent's next end phase. Then you can trash 2 cards from your hand. If you do, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 0 power or less. Remember that any event with the Dressrosa type in this event has the added benefit of being able to be played off of the 7-cost Subtle. So you're getting all of this on top of a 7-cost 9000 power blocker. And this card has 3 ways it can be used. 1, to reduce the opponent's power and hit into it with your smaller characters to KO it. 2, to use the second part of the effect, trashing 2 cards to KO the card directly. Or 3, using the power reduction which persists through the opponent's turn to preemptively stop an attack from higher power characters. The first reason is why this deck loves to run Bella Betty despite some of its downsides. When the opponent's 10,000 power character, ergo something like the 6-cost Enel, is fire fisted in the ass, it's reduced to 2000 power, making cards like that 1-cost Bella Betty and 1-cost Viola extremely valuable now on top of being a searcher. If you have no 2000 power characters on the board, you essentially only have the option to hit it with Cavendish or your leader. As Cavendish is 6000 power and your leader is going to be at 8000 power thanks to this event, you ideally want to be hitting your opponent's leader with these larger attacks to apply pressure while simultaneously reducing the opponent's board. Having smaller characters on the board may not guarantee the death of these larger characters, but at the bare minimum will force the opponent to cut counter in ways they don't want to. The second way to use Fire Fist, KOing it directly with the second part of the effect, is not an option you will choose too often, but is something to keep in mind. If the opponent has a 8000 power or less character you want to take out preemptively, such as a blocker like Roshnante and Law, you can consider using the KO aspect of Fire Fist to deal with the character, trashing 2 Cavendish or other counterless characters from your hand with the highest priority. Note that the power reduction and the KO can be used on different targets. For example, you can reduce the power of the opponent's Sabel while simultaneously KOing the 1-cost Rebecca blocker in the mirror matchup. The third way to use this card should be used sparingly, as it's one less Fire Fist you will have in the game. When the opponent has an active character you don't want to let attack but don't have the means to KO it, you can reduce its power by 8,000 to avoid the problem for a turn. Generally, you choose this option when no other events in your hand feel great to use, which can happen if the opponent identifies a spot where they can leave all of their characters active to counter your board control strategy. It's for these moments that you may instead want to flip the switch and go aggressive with the second 7-cost event in this deck, Would You Let Me Eat the Flame Fruit. This card draws 2 cards when activated and gives your leader Lucy double attack as well as 3,000 power during this turn. Also, it has the trigger to draw 2 cards as well. Unlike Fire Fist, which has several different ways to use it, either aggressively or defensively, this card is almost purely aggressive, as when your leader has high power and double attack, you want to be swinging in the opponent's leader to start applying pressure. Swinging for 8,000 with double attack in many cases will force the opponent to have to counter out of hand to ensure they don't lose 2 life in one sling. However, 8,000 power, while high, is not hard to counter out of, only necessitating 2 cards with 2,000 counter. This is where you may consider using the other part of your leader effect, as though technically all of your events in hand are plus 1,000 counter, they can also be plus 1,000 power. Trashing one event and making your leader at least 9,000 power makes it significantly more difficult to counter out of from the opponent's perspective compared to 8,000, now requiring 2 2,000 counters as well as 1 1,000 counter, meaning 3 cards to counter out this attack should they not have something like counter events. Therefore, if the opponent has no blockers on the board, consider using your leader effect just once to annoy your opponent with this double attack. This event, in tandem with your leader effect drawing 3 cards, also gives you the fuel to be able to use your leader effect as well, so this additional cost does not hurt Lucy when trying to create bigger attacks. This being said, as these events also act as counter for your leader, you don't want to be using this side of your leader effect all too often. Other than these 3 events, another star of this deck is the Barrier Pistol, which I'll be referring to as Bari Pistol because it's much easier to say in Japanese. This card has the main effect to bottom deck a 6,000 power or less character, with a trigger that activates the main effect. This card on paper is just a worse jet pistol, a card that hasn't seen play in over 2 years in the meta, but is insanely valuable in this deck because not only are you drawing a card, but it's also a card that can be used off of the 7-cost Lucy very well. This card gives the deck a way to interact with the opponent's characters similar to Fire Fist, but can also interact with active characters as well. Not only this, but used in tandem with Just Watch Me Ace gives one of the opponent's characters minus 2,000 power, assuming that you have 4 or more events in your trash. We'll talk a little bit more about this card later. This card or the 2-cost Koala can help you reach higher thresholds to bottom deck with Bari Pistol. All this put together, a truly devastating combo that this deck has on 8 dong is to play Just Watch Me Ace for 1 dong, into the 7-cost Sabo to play the 5-cost Bari Pistol. This allows you to develop a 9,000 power body, a blocker, and bottom deck one of the opponent's— wait, hold on. Isn't this just Icy, Moria, Rebecca, Helmeppo, Spandine, Lucci? No wonder this deck's good. The core game plan of Lucy revolves around playing the Cavendish early on to give you the time and space to safely play the 7-cost Sabo. You'll want to keep your life total high enough that you can safely use Sabo as an attacker, as this deck struggles to make lots of small attacks, instead resorting to large yet slow attacks. Staying healthy will let you avoid the decision making of whether or not you should keep your blocker active to stay safe. It's for this reason that your general curve in the early game is going to be as follows. On 1 and 2 dong, search prioritizing characters that can later on become attackers for Fire Fist or a blocker in the case of Rebecca. Choosing if you should play a 2,000 power Searcher or Rebecca should come down to the matchup's likelihood of this character becoming an attacker, and /or you need the 2,000 counter in your hand in the case of Viola. Keep in mind what cards you're looking for, as well as if you don't have Cavendish, play Rebecca, Viola, or the Search event to make sure that you have the best odds of finding it. Note that if you have enough time in the early game to search multiple times, this decision doesn't really matter all too much. This is only just when you have an abundance of searchers in your early hand that you need to decide between. On 3 dong, this deck really has no 3 cost to play, so you will just want to keep using your searchers or use events like Go Ahead and Use Them, Mr. Luffy, should you run them. On 4, you want to play Cavendish, ideally through the 4-cost event. Holding on to the event in hand when going second doesn't have much purpose, as you have 1 more turn before your 7-cost Sabo, unlike the 5 dong turn, where you have a single turn to play the Cavendish before you reach 7 dong. If you have 2 Cavendish, 1 event, as well as the 7-cost Sabo in hand, you consider holding onto the event to play off the 7-cost Sabo the next turn to help expand your board further. Unless you have clear intention to use the 4-cost event off the 7-cost Sabo, you should use the event now. Though you can use Bari Pistol from this turn, the opponent at this point likely doesn't have a character worth bottom decking quite yet, so by default you will want to Cavendish on this turn. An exception to this rule would be a higher influence card like the 4-cost Hancock. The 6 dong turn is very much the same as the 5 dong turn, but the opponent may have better targets for Bari Pistol. Not only this, but because you were already able to establish a Cavendish on the board the turn before, this is a great time to use Bari Pistol to get rid of the opponent's 5-cost Nami or even the opponent's Cavendish in the mirror. From the 7 dong turn onward, you ideally want to keep playing the 7-cost Sabo, choosing which event to activate based on the factors mentioned earlier in this video. And while some lists are trying to finish out the game exclusively with this 7-cost Sabo, a lot of the times you'll find lists running a couple of extra cards as different top end. In this next section, let's talk about 3 potential cards that you may want to add in to supplement the existing power within this deck. Roger is one of, if not the strongest card within red and is extremely good, actually even better if you use it in Red Blue Lucy. When going for lethal when either you or the opponent is at 0 life and you drop down this Roger, yes, your entire board gets unblockable, yes, you also get a 13,000 power rush character on the board, but you actually get one extra thing, and that's the ability to use your lead effect to increase your leader's power as well. Because of Lucy's when attacking effect being able to trash any event or stage from your hand to give your leader plus 1000 power for that battle, in tandem with this 13,000 rush character, which gives your entire board as well as your leader unblockable, your leader's also going to be hitting anywhere upwards of 9, 10, 11,000 power just by dumping your entire hand of events as a last Hail Mary trying to find that lethal. The 8 cost Jinbe is an option that can help out in the mirror. This 8 cost 10,000 power character generally isn't really going to be played on the 8 dong turn, but rather on the 10 dong turn to use the on play effect. On play by resting 2 dong, effectively making this a 10 cost 10,000 power character, you can draw 2 cards as well as bounce a 7 cost or less. Removing a 7 cost just essentially doesn't exist in blue anymore due to the fact that Sable as well as the 9 cost Mihawk are now going to be rotating out. So this is the best way to get rid of the opponent's 7 cost Lucy within the mirror. Not only this, but again with your leader's on attack effect, you can trash a card from your hand, meaning that you can actually make this 8 cost Jinbe have rush very easily. But the reason why this card isn't being adopted in every single Lucy list, despite Lucy being a pretty prevalent matchup within this meta, is because it has some pretty difficult downsides that you have to overcome and set up for to make sure that you can mitigate properly. If you give Jinbe rush and hit for 10,000 power, well then you've set up the scenario that we talked about earlier in this video where you have a 10,000 power rested character on the board, and you've also given back the opponent a Subble, meaning that if they didn't have another Subble, they can easily replay the Subble, play Fire Fist to reduce your Jinbe down to 2,000 power, and then use their 2,000 power characters to abuse it. For this reason, if you do run the Jinbe, you may actually want to choose not to give it rush in favor of leaving it active to be able to rest with your characters altogether on the next turn. So in short, you should only give Jinbe rush if you're confident that you can actually defend it on this next turn. If you can, however, manage to hide this Jinbe rested behind a blocker, then, as the kids say, this card goes dummy hard. The third and final option for top end is the 7 cost Zoro. This card, giving your leader plus 2,000 power, makes your leader effect extremely powerful because your events that give your leader plus 1,000 power, when played after Zoro, essentially feel like they're giving you plus 3,000, making yourself extremely tanky alongside all of the resources that this deck already has. This makes 7 cost Zoro especially good into decks that like to pepper you with smaller attacks like Hancock or other very meta decks like Moria. Regardless, because Lucy has such great board control tools as well as great resource acquisition, you will want to play a slow and methodical game, choking your opponent out of their options rather than making your own win conditions. And with that all be said, now that you know how this deck's supposed to function, let's talk about some more small details like the 2,000 counters as well as other events that you may consider tech in for certain matchups before wrapping up this video. Let's first look at some other staple cards within this deck like Dressrosa Kingdom as well as Just Watch Me Ace, and more specifically why I run them at these counts. Dressrosa Kingdom is a stage with the on-play effect. If your leader has the Dressrosa type, draw 1 card. On your opponent's attack, you may rest this stage and trash 1 event or stage card from your hand. Up to one of your leader or character cards gains plus 2,000 power during this battle. This card on paper sounds great. It's a card neutral stage like Merry-Go that has the additional effect of turning the bricks in your hand into 2,000 counter. I think this card is really good, so if there was no limit to the number of cards you could have in your deck, I would most certainly run more of this card. Though in most decks this would turn bricks in your hand into 2,000 counter, actually for Lucy it turns your 1k counters into 2k counters. This difference isn't all too significant in the grand scheme of the game, but has one key difference between your leader effect that makes it very valuable. Your leader can only actually defend himself with the events in his hand, but with the Dressrosa Kingdom stage, you can actually defend your leader or character with plus 2,000 counter, meaning that if the opponent tries to play around your leader by taking out your board, you still have a means of turning your bricks in hand into 2,000 counter cards. This card has no downsides, as of course you can use your leader effect to get rid of stages as well, but the upsides aren't significant, making it a similar situation as the 3 cost event, meaning that I'm only putting in at 2 copies. If you decide to reduce the number of 2,000 counters in your deck to 8, for example, however, you may consider wanting to increase this up to 3 or even 4 copies. Another event that's actually in a similar boat is Just Watch Me Ace. This 4 cost event, if you have 4 or more events in your trash, you give this card minus 3 cost. Then main and counter, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3,000 power during this turn. And now before I go further, let me clarify one of the ruling situations on this card, because it does not work like a card like Tempest Kick where this can act as your 4th event in trash due to the rule 2-7-3. When activating an event from your hand, you should first reveal the card you wish to activate, select a number of active Dong cards in your cost area equal to the card's cost, rest those Dong cards, and then trash the revealed card to activate it. In the case of Just Watch Me Ace, you would have to pay 4 first before you can get the effect off, even if you now have 4 events in your trash. The reason why Tempest Kick works when you only have 9 cards in your trash before you use the card is because you pay the full cost of playing the card before Tempest Kick checks for 10 cards in your trash. Don't let yourself or your opponent make this mistake, because it is something that a lot of people are going to mess up, especially early on. Still, the main and counter effect is extremely good in this deck, giving one of the opponent's characters only minus 2000 power, which works great defensively and offensively in tandem with things like Bari Bari Pistol. This is a card that I feel like I should be running at 4 copies, but the only reason that I'm running it at 3 is because I'm running the 2-cost Koala at 2 copies. The difference between running Just Watch Me Ace and Koala at 4 to 1 versus 3 to 2 are very small, but I prefer to run Koala at 2 copies because I hate one-offs. No, just kidding, there's an actual reason. In the NL matchup, NL likes to hit you a lot for 6k, and for that reason, I prefer to have more generic 2000 counters in the deck that I don't actually have to leave a Dong up to use, because the number of stages that I run is rather low. Still, I think you go either way on this, so depending on your playstyle, if you like to be more aggressive or defensive, try to experiment with the ratios of these cards. And before we mention the elephant in the room, the Buhuba, so if you've been looking at my deck list closely, let's first talk about the 2000 counters. This deck, at least in the current meta, has 2 staple 2000 counters, and that is the 1-cost Viola and the 1-cost Leo. Viola has already been discussed ad nauseum. Just being a searcher with 2000 counter in this deck and also having 2000 power is really, really nice. And there's honestly, in my opinion, no world where you'd ever take this card out in favor of anything else. The 1-cost Leo, however, is a meta call, but because of the way that the meta is shaping up, this card for now is guaranteed at 4 copies. Leo is a 1-cost 2000 power character with 2000 counter, where if your character with 7000 base power or less would be removed from the field by your opponent's effects, you may place one of your characters at the bottom of the owner's deck instead. With the abundance of Lucy's in the meta, you're bound to hit the mirror at some point, and your Cavendish being one of the very few attackers that you have in the game and one of the means that you have to increase your resources is going to be extremely valuable. Therefore, although decks like NL or Hancock may not have very much board control, just having this card as an option in the case that you fight the mirror, as well as it having the Dressrosa type making it very searchable, is really, really nice within this deck. And so now the question in this OP15 meta is, what are the other 2Ks you're going to add into your deck? You don't necessarily need all too many because you also have your stage, so really you're just going to be choosing between these next 3 cards, the 2-cost Koala, the 4-cost Sabo, or the 4-cost Cavendish for the last 1 to 3 slots in your deck. Let's first start with the Cavendish, the card that was printed within the set, and therefore Bandai kind of indicating to us that they want us to play this card. This 4-cost 4000 power character, if you have 4 or more events in your trash, gains plus 2000 power. This does not specify opponent's turn or your turn, so therefore it'll attack for 6000 and be 6000 on the opponent's turn, making it effectively just a vanilla card with 2000 counter once you meet this condition. This card is great all around and helps with your consistency as well because it gives you more targets for the 4-cost event, and no one else can have it. It's our memento of him. However, this Cavendish is generally going to be played on the 2nd turn of the game, and you may notice that on the 3rd turn when it's going to start attacking, you may not actually have 4 events in your trash if you haven't been countering aggressively. Therefore, in actuality, this character is going to be a 4-cost 4000 for the first couple of turns before you can really start to attack, making it feel pretty bad in comparison to the other 4-cost Cavendish. However, this is just a consistency piece to make sure you don't fall too far behind should you not find this other blue 4-cost Cavendish. The other 4-cost 2000 counter in contention for the spot in the deck is the 4-cost Sabo. This 4-cost 5000 power 2000 counter has the effect, if your character with a base cost of 7 or less other than Sabo would be removed from the field by your opponent's effect, you may return this character to your owner's hand instead. This card sounds excellent on paper, being able to defend a 7-cost or less, protecting your oh wait, no. It doesn't protect Sabo. The 7-cost Sabo, being named Sabo, is not actually protected by this 4-cost Sabo, meaning that this Sabo would only protect your Cavendish on the board. This is, in a way, more copies of Leo, but really can only be played on board if you're going 2nd, as you'll have more timings to play out characters. However, the real reason why people are running this card is because of its typing. It's a 2000 counter with the type Dressrosa and Revolutionary Army on top of being a 4-cost character. So essentially, this is just a well-statted and well-typed card to help increase your consistency in a different way. It doesn't have as much power as Cavendish, so it will die very quickly should you choose to use it as an attacker, but it is a nice consistency piece, especially if you are running that Bella Betty searcher. The 3rd and final 2000 counter, which is the one that I have chosen to include in my deck, is the 2-cost Koala. This Revolutionary Army type character has the on-play effect where if your leader has the Revolutionary Army type, you can give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 3000 power during this turn. This card's on-play effect is really nice. The closest comparison to this card is the Ace Sabo Luffy 2000 counter, but this card has 3000 power. While the other two 2000 counters were generally consistency pieces to help make your 4-cost event more attractive, Koala is attractive in a different way. The versatility of being able to use this card as a 2000 counter or having the on-play effect to reduce the opponent's power gives you a lot of different avenues to be able to reduce the opponent's power and further control the board. This on top of having a good stat line makes it that in later turns when the opponent has even larger bodies on the board, Fire Fist, you hit into those reduced characters and bully their frail state. But again, a large reason why I'm running this card over the Dressrosa type 2000 counters is because I'm running the 1-cost Bella Betty. To ensure that my Bella Betty hits most of the time, I would prefer to run the 4-cost Sabo or the 2-cost Koala, but the reason why I chose the 2-cost Koala and not the more consistent piece in the 4-cost Sabo is because there's something that I would rather do than play a 4-cost 5000 power character, and that's to just draw a lot of cards, which is where I'd like to introduce Buhubasto. Buhubasto is an event that's usually only used in blue-purple Sanji, but I think it's very nice within this deck. If your leader is multicolored, you can choose one of the following effects, either to return one of the opponent's characters with a cost of 4 or less to the owner's hand, or if you have 6 or less cards in your hand, draw 2 cards. Regardless of which side of the effect you chose, because your leader effect can activate off of any event that costs 3 or more, you will still get the draw off, meaning that in the early game on that 3-dong turn or the 4-dong turn in the case that you don't have that 4-cost Cavendish, you can draw 3 cards and gain those resources in an alternative way. The reason why I play Buhubasto and not go ahead and use a Mr. Luffy despite the Dressrosa type that this event has is because of the second effect. Being able to bounce a 4-cost for only 3 dong while being card neutral thanks to your leader effect is so nice, specifically into the NL matchup, because Dieser Bastardhund is one of the most terrifying cards within the game. If you can bounce the opponent's Holy on 4 dong while being card neutral, they've effectively lost the ability to break your life early on, and they sacrifice their second turn playing out the Holy. The flexibility of being able to use Buhubasto as a simple draw 3 for 3 dong, or being able to get rid of one of the opponent's characters, also including things like the 4-cost Cavendish as it can reach up to 4 costs, makes this card an excellent choice and a card that I really want to be playing at 4 copies, but due to the fact that I'm running the Bella Betty engine, I struggle to find space for it. Still, this card is great in the early game on that 3 or 4 long turn in the case that you don't have Cavendish to just draw 3 cards. It's great in the mid game to bounce back the Cavendish or the Holy, and it's also great in the late game because in tandem with the 7-cost Sabo, for 10 dong, you can first draw 3 cards with Buhubasto, then use Sabo to play out another event, filling out your dong curve extremely nicely. All in all, I absolutely love Buhubasto in this deck, and I highly recommend trying it if you haven't already. And so now we've finally gone over all of the cards within my deck list, but I do want to talk about one more card that's in a lot of people's deck lists for Lucy, and that is the 2-cost Fire Fist. This Fire Fist gives one of the opponent's characters minus 4,000 power during the turn, and then if you have 2 or less life, KOs up to one of the opponent's characters with 0 power or less, with the trigger activating the same effect. This card is really good within the mirror, once again being able to use the KO effect as well as the minus effect separately, while having the Revolutionary Army type, making the hit rate of your Bella Betty even higher. Additionally, for only 9 dong, you play the 7-cost Sabo to activate the 7-cost Fire Fist, then use the 2-cost Fire Fist to KO a 12,000 power character on the board. The reason why I'm not running this card is simply because there just aren't enough threatening 12,000 power characters in the game right now, and of course I was trying to make space for Buhubasto, a card that I personally value a little bit higher. Still, if decks like Ace or Emu start to come back into the meta, then you may want to consider adding this Fire Fist in place of Buhubasto just to make sure that you have the extra firepower. None of the cards that I've mentioned in this video so far are bad choices, so if you feel like you prefer one or the other, don't use my list as gospel. Please use whatever cards you think are correct for the way that you want to play out the game. Regardless of if you choose to play Lucy or against Lucy, I hope that you learned something that can be very helpful within this video. Lucy's curve for the most part is going to be the same for a lot of different matchups, so I won't be going into every single matchup in depth. Also, of course, this isn't a MetaFi guide, this is just a free YouTube video, which I'm starting to question if it was a really good idea because, oh my god, making this video was so long. But I think there needs to be better free content out there. So if you can just throw me a like or something, I would really appreciate it. I think you now have the tools to go out there and win with Lucy. Thank you for watching this video in a new series that I'm trying to do a little bit more often, something that I've wanted to do for quite a while, but does take a while to make these kinds of videos. If you did enjoy it and you want to see more videos like this, a more closer look at specific leaders within the meta instead of an overall look at the meta, then please let me know in the comments, and also you can let me know in a more numerical way by liking, subscribing, sharing it with a friend, because if my channel grows, then I can do a lot of cooler things because I'll have the time and resources to be able to make that all happen. Thank you guys so much for your support. Just as a reminder, I am trying to reach a subscriber goal of 33,333, which I realize is a bit of a mouthful, so I'm reducing it down to 33,000 subscribers, at which point I will quit my job and do YouTube/content full time. I hope that you guys are excited for that, because inevitably it will happen at some point, and I am getting ready for that to happen. But of course, it is still a bit of a scary leap to make. I need to make sure that everything is in order, getting out of a system in Japan is very difficult as well. Also starting up your own system to make sure that you have everything good and that you can get the best content possible are all things that I need to make sure happen if I do end up doing YouTube full time. So thank you so much for your support on all of my videos. As always, once again, subscribe because it makes me feel a little bit happy, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.